Have you ever felt like you were being ignored? Maybe you were talking to someone and they didn't acknowledge what you said. Perhaps you did something nice for someone and they didn't even say thank you. When these things happen, it can make us feel invisible and unimportant. And sometimes we might even wonder if God is ignoring us too. Well, hello, and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about a Bible verse that reminds us that no matter how small or insignificant we may feel, we are never forgotten by God. So let's dive in. Are you forgotten? Discover the truth of Luke 12:6 today. As Christians, we know that God loves us very much. But sometimes it can be hard to remember that when we're going through tough times. We might start to doubt God's love for us and wonder if He really cares about what happens to us. That's why it's important to take time to remind ourselves of the truth. And one verse that can help us do that is Luke 12:6. Luke 12:6 says, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 small coins? Yet not one of them is forgotten in God's sight." This verse is part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, also known as the Beatitudes. In this sermon, Jesus taught His disciples and followers about how to live a life that pleases God. And one of the things He talked about was not to worry. In fact, verses 22 to 34 of chapter 12 are dedicated to showing us that God takes care of everything. So what does Luke 12:6 teach us about God's care for creation? Let's unpack it together. Do you remember the context of Luke 12:6? To understand the meaning of Luke 12:6, it's important to look at the context of the passage. In verses 22 to 24, Jesus tells His followers not to worry about food and drink because the Father in heaven knows that they need them. He gives an example with lilies and says that if God can take care of such a beautiful flower, He can take care of them too. Then in verses 25 to 27, Jesus talks about how people worry about having enough clothes to wear. Again, He reassures them that God will take care of their needs. He mentions how the birds do not plant or harvest food, and yet God still takes care of them. And how the lilies don't have to worry about being beautiful, and yet God makes them beautiful anyway. With these examples in mind, we can now come back to Luke 12:6 and appreciate its full meaning. What is the significance of Luke 12:6? The main idea of Luke 12:6 is that no matter how small and insignificant we might feel, God pays attention to every detail of our lives. It's a reminder that we are important to Him and that He cares about us more than we can imagine. There are a few key points to consider here. First, the value of sparrows. In the first century, sparrows were considered to be worthless birds. They were so common that they were sold in pairs for only 2 small copper coins, which was practically nothing. However, Jesus uses sparrows to teach us a valuable lesson about God's care. He wants us to know that even the smallest and weakest creatures are important to Him, and that He pays attention to every detail of their lives. Second, the number 6. The number 6 in this verse is interesting because it emphasizes the absolute nature of God's knowledge. There are 6 days in a week, and the number 6 often represents something that is almost complete or perfect. By saying that not one sparrow is forgotten, Jesus is emphasizing that God knows everything about all of them. There is no exception. No sparrow is so small or insignificant that God doesn't know about it. Third, the idea of being forgotten. For a bird to be forgotten means that it would have to disappear without a trace, unnoticed and unknown. But Jesus assures His followers that this is not the case. God sees every sparrow that goes missing, and He knows exactly where it went and why. Fourth, the contrast between human and divine perspective. Humans often have limited perspectives and can overlook the smallest details, can lose track of time and forget appointments, promises, and loved ones. But God is all-knowing, and His perspective is much broader than ours. He sees the big picture, but also every little detail. He knows what we need before we do, and He is always aware of what is happening around us. What can we learn from Luke 12:6? Now let's think about what this passage teaches us about God and about ourselves. God is all-knowing and cares about every detail of our lives. He sees us, and He knows us better than we know ourselves. We are never too small or insignificant for God to notice. He has a special love for us and wants us to know that we are important to Him. We should not worry about the things of this life because God has everything under control. He will take care of our needs, just as He takes care of the sparrows. He is more powerful than any problem we could ever face, and He is always with us to help and guide us. we should live with faith and trust in God's plan for our lives. He has a purpose for each one of us, and we can trust that He will help us fulfill it. Instead of worrying, we should focus on living a life that honors God and brings Him glory. So the next time you feel forgotten or unimportant, remember the words of Jesus in Luke 12:6. Know that you are never out of God's sight. He sees you, and He loves you more than you can imagine. Don't worry about the troubles of life, because God is in control. Put your trust in Him and live a life that honors Him. Why do sparrows matter? I'm sure many of us have seen sparrows in our lifetime. They're small brown birds with a short tail and a simple song. They're very common and often seen as ordinary and even boring. But Jesus chose to use sparrows to teach us a profound spiritual lesson. So why do sparrows matter? First, they represent the small and weak. Jesus said that the sparrows cost only 2 small coins, indicating that they were worthless and insignificant in the eyes of people. Similarly, many of us feel insignificant and powerless in a world that often seems to value only the strong and successful. But Jesus reminds us that we are not defined by our size or strength, but by the love and value that God places on us. Second, they symbolize God's attention to detail. The fact that Jesus specifically mentioned sparrows shows that He was paying attention to the smallest and most overlooked creatures. In the same way, He pays attention to every detail of our lives, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem. He sees our tears, hears our prayers, and feels our pain. Third, sparrows represent the beauty of simplicity. Their simple song and modest appearance remind us that true beauty and joy are often found in the simplest things in life. In a world that values grandeur and complexity, Jesus calls us to find beauty in simplicity and to appreciate the small things that God has given us. Fourth, sparrows symbolize hope and resilience. Even though they are small and vulnerable, sparrows are also resilient and adaptable creatures. They can quickly escape danger, and they are able to survive in a variety of environments. In the same way, we can find hope and strength in God when we face difficult circumstances. With God's help, we can overcome any obstacle and find new life and new hope. Fifth, sparrows are a reminder to care for God's creation. As Christians, we are called to be stewards of God's creation and to care for all living things. By highlighting the importance of sparrows, Jesus reminds us to pay attention to the needs of all creatures and to protect the environment that God has entrusted to us. In conclusion, sparrows may seem like ordinary and uninteresting birds, but Jesus saw them as an opportunity to teach us profound spiritual lessons. They remind us that we are never too small or insignificant for God to notice. They show us that God pays attention to every detail of our lives, and that He sees our tears, hears our prayers, and feels our pain. They call us to find beauty in simplicity and to never lose hope, no matter how difficult our circumstances may seem. And finally, they remind us to care for all of God's creation. Next time you see a sparrow, take a moment to appreciate its beauty and resilience. And remember the lessons Jesus taught us through this small and often overlooked creature. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to share it with your friends and family. We would love to reach more people with the message of God's love and grace. If you haven't already subscribed, we invite you to do so and join our growing online community. We have lots of other videos that we know you'll enjoy. So we'll see you next time. God's Own.